Thank you, Simone. How is it sound? Is our sound okay?
You sound good.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be here with you today. Thank you, Blavity, for having us, and thank you all attendees for spending your time with us. I'm Danielle. I'm a manager of diversity and inclusion at MongoDB. I've been with the company for over 6.5 years and have watched it grow from a little under 400 to over 2,200 employees. If you're not familiar with MongoDB, MongoDB is a data platform designed for modern applications. It's been voted most wanted database on Stack Overflow for 3 years, and it's used by companies like Epic Games, which is the company behind Fortnite, Google, Coinbase, and Adobe, just to name a few. Now, despite the current environment, we have not stopped or even slowed down our hiring. We continue to grow and currently have about 170 roles open across departments across the globe, and that's part of why we're here today. So today we're going to start with a panel in which my colleagues are going to share their journeys and how you can visualize and approach your path to success. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so please ask questions in the chat, engage with us. We can't see you, and we're sad about that, but we can see your messages come through and see that energy, and we will make sure to respond to any comments or any questions towards the end of our panel. There should also be a post pinned in the platform. I believe the Blavity team is going to share a link in the chat right now. So if you would like to connect with us beyond this panel and receive some swag, please take a minute to complete the form. And you'll get something sent directly to your doorstep. I can actually show you what it is right here. It's one of these cocoon gridded tech traps, help you keep your life organized. It might take you a while to start using it, but once you do, you will never want to live without it. In addition to that, also comes a webcam cover to keep your privacy. So again, if you want to stay in touch with us, learn more about open roles, we'll be in touch, or get some swag, as a token of our appreciation for attending. Please take a minute to complete the form. And I also believe that we're going to launch a poll right now. This is just for us to get to know you a little bit better and to understand which area of tech you work in or want to work in. So I'll just give you a little bit of time to complete those right now. All right, so it looks like we have the results in terms of which level role you're looking for. It looks like 63% of our attendees are looking for entry level, 33% are looking for mid to senior, and 3% are looking for an executive or leadership role. Okay, so in this panel, as Simone mentioned, we're going to be talking about building a roadmap to a successful career in tech. So oftentimes we think about a roadmap as a strategic plan for a company or a product that defines a goal and the major steps needed to reach that goal. But we can also apply that strategic thinking to our own journeys. And this is why today I am joined by 3 of my inspiring colleagues, all who are in leadership positions at MongoDB, managing global distributed teams of about 10 people each. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Stephanie Samuels, who's a sales leader at MongoDB, Tosin Ajayi, who leads the Global Solutions Architect team, and Wisdom Omuya, who is an engineering lead. Hi, panelists.
Hello.
Hey. So I'm just going to get right into the panel and ask you to tell us a little bit about your background and your current role with MongoDB. Stephanie, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. Hello, AfroTech. I am Stephanie Samuels. I'm the Regional Director for Enterprise Sales in Chicago and Wisconsin. So my team is responsible for mapping Mongo technology, our solutions, to companies in Chicago and Illinois who are 250 million and above. I've been with Mongo for about 1.5 years, and prior to that, this was a company called NetScout for just shy of 13 years, where I led a team of sales and sales engineers. And then I've also worked for other technology powerhouses and smaller startups. Interesting fact is that growing up as a kid in school and in high school and college, I never really envisioned myself in sales. And I certainly didn't envision myself in technology at all. So my road to technologies and like specifically technology sales is really like a fantastic result of a series of really unfortunate events. So I'm a walking example of how the challenges and the road less travel can translate into opportunities beyond your wildest dreams. That is a story for a time when we have more time, though.
Tosin?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, AfroTech. I'm Tosin Ajayi. I lead the global solution architects organization for our corporate business. So in MongoDB, our business is split into two segments, if you will. There is the enterprise, which Stephanie certainly belongs to, and then there's the corporate, which handles companies with $250 million in revenue and below. I was actually born and raised in Nigeria, and it's quite interesting. My story is quite different in that I immigrated to the UK after high school for school and immigrated to the US after that for more school and did a whole lot of schooling before I started my career. So when I first got out of college, I took a job as a developer, as actually a software engineer at a database company. Because I had extreme love for technology. And over the years, what I found was that my curiosity in how customers make requests for features and what they ask us to do really got me curious about what's driving those needs, what's driving those requirements. So I figured, hey, let me look for a role that actually allows me to get engaged more with customers. And that's how I got into pre-sales. The role in pre-sales is quite interesting. My team or my role, we work with folks like Stephanie's team to help in conveying the value of our product to the customers, to the market, working with the community, working with other aspects of the organization. So in a way, we are glue across different parts of the organization, from product to sales, in terms of bringing the right product to the market. So I'm super excited to be here and talk more about what I do and how I got where I am.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Wisdom Omuya. I am the engineering lead for the Atlas Data Lake team at MongoDB. Like Tosin, I'm also Nigerian, born and raised there. I moved to the US a couple of years ago for grad school. I actually first started with MongoDB as an intern way back in 2012. Had a great experience. They really spoiled me. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I totally have to join this company afterwards. And so right after grad school, I joined the company, and I've been with MongoDB right now for, I think, a little under 8 years. The Atlas Data Lake team is a group of about 10 engineers who work to develop and maintain the Atlas Data Lake service. That's essentially a fully managed data lake as a service that allows users to query and analyze data across both Amazon's S3 service as well as MongoDB's database as a service offering. We call it Atlas. Users only pay for how much data that's processed and retrieved from their data lakes. And one of its cool features is something called Online Archive that allows you to tier data from your Atlas cluster to S3. So you spend less money to maintain your transactional data. Unlike, I guess, Tosin and Stephanie, I'm fully in the engineering space. So my job as an engineering lead requires me to write code, review code, and a ton of meetings. I'm really happy to be here and look forward to our panel today.
Thank you for that. Wisdom, you just gave a great lead into the next question. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what some of the specific skills are required to become a leader in your field.
Okay, that's a really interesting one. I'd say one of the things that I found really different from when I was an IC was just how much work I had to do. I remember as an IC, you had a project or a ticket and you totally focused on that, right? But as the leader, the buck essentially stops at you. And so one thing I think is extremely important is just being really organized, right? Like there might be half a dozen, up to a dozen projects on your team happening simultaneously. And so if you as yourself aren't organized, you might have a difficult time organizing work for your team. So I think being able to organize yourself is extremely, extremely important. Another big thing I think helps engineering leaders be successful is your ability to communicate a lot and correctly. This includes both your colleagues in other departments, your team, upper management, because communication is something I think we all can improve on, right? And so as a leader, you have to regularly work on becoming better, keeping yourself informed, and also informing other people as well about what's going on. I do think you actually also have to genuinely care about people. This allows you to be a better listener, a better mentor, and just generally support your team's day-to-day and their career goals. In the engineering space, obviously you have to have a lot of technical depth, right? So it's important to say this doesn't mean you have to be the expert in everything, but you at least need to know enough to provide appropriate guidelines on what people should do in cases where they have a blocker that they don't know how to solve. And in cases where no one on your team perhaps has the expertise to guide them, you can at least provide guidance to your team members on where they can get more assistance. You obviously also have to be really okay with getting your hands dirty, like doing the hard work, right? I certainly wouldn't ask anyone on my team to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And so I think that's a really, really important trait to have as a leader. One interesting rule I came across recently is called the platinum rule. So you guys might be familiar with the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you'll have them do unto you. The platinum rule is really interesting. It says, do unto others as they would have done unto themselves, right? And so I think it's really important as a leader to appreciate that just because something works for you doesn't necessarily mean it will work for everyone, right? And so it's important to appreciate the different nuances and work patterns and predilections, predispositions that your team has, and do your best to support them in the manner that's most conducive to the way they work. So those are just a handful of things. You could probably read dozens of books about this, but just a couple of things I think are worth considering. Yeah.
Thank you. Stephanie, would you be able to share?
Yeah, I was listening to Wisdom and kind of shaking my head yes, because I was right on board with everything that he was saying. Some additional kind of additive things that I would say on the leadership side too is that one of the things I learned pretty quickly as a sales leader is that leading is not really about managing, but it's really about inspiring. It's really about inspiring your teams to be better individually, inspiring them to be better collectively, kind of inspiring them to strive to what they think is impossible. When you're doing those types of things, then that one-on-one management becomes more organic because people are really seeing that you're invested in them and that you want to help them. And then you also find that you don't have to manage as much to the metrics as you would if you really weren't trying to drive them towards a bigger goal. So that's one thing that I just kind of like to add. And then in terms of for everyone out here, when it comes to either being an individual contributor or leading, one of the things that's important is to have like a very natural thirst for knowledge. You've got to naturally be inquisitive, naturally want to be better and have that come from within. Don't wait for someone to tell you to go learn something. Like really think about what would it take to be better? What is it that's being asked of me? And how do I take it that next level? some thoughts that I had.
Thank you. Tosin?
Oh, wow. It's that's, those are really, really great answers. There isn't too much more to add because I certainly agree wholly with what Wisdom and Stephanie have said. Just maybe to echo slightly differently what, Stephanie mentioned, one thing I also strongly believe is trusting your team. So I think Stephanie mentioned inspiring the team. The other aspect that is also to actually have trust in them. And I think for a lot of leaders, that's actually where I'll say first-time leaders. That's one of the hardest things to do, right? Because that actually involves letting go and trusting the team to actually, come through. Now, the way I look at that personally is that if I've done a really good job, maintain my diligence in recruiting and hiring, right, and mentoring and coaching, then I should certainly be able to trust my team to come through when the time is needed, right? So that's the only addition I'll add to Stephanie's statement.
Thank you. Stephanie, you touched a little bit on, things you need to do to position yourself kind of above the rest. So my question to you is, have you found the need to differentiate yourself from others in order to reach your goals? And if so, what exactly did you do differently?
Yes. So that's an interesting question for a salesperson, right? So kind of in this area where I truly have used what some might consider a disadvantage to my advantage. So in sales, one of the biggest hurdles we face is being remembered, kind of standing out. As a Black female sales leader, I already know I'm going to stand out. And so I really capitalize on that. I already know that I'm going to be remembered. So I take that, and on top of that, I add being absolutely knowledgeable on what it is that my company does, knowledgeable on our competition, knowledgeable in the space and sales process and what our customers need. And I take that and I put it on top of the fact that I'm already going to be naturally memorable. And I use that to have a leg up on other people. I mean, it is the fact of the matter when you take the fact that when I go and call on someone, they will absolutely remember me. And then I happen to be very good or make sure my team is really good at what we're doing. This is a lesson that I had learned early on. So, in full disclosure, I've been doing tech sales for, dare I say it, like 20 years. So if you think about it, 10, 15, 20 years ago, having a Black female and technology was unheard of. And instead of letting that get into my head, I just decided right then, how can I use that to be exceptional? And I allowed that to propel me.
Thank you. Tosin, what about you?
Yeah, so, in my role, I work very closely with, not Stephanie's team directly, but, sales leaders as well as other sales teams. And one thing I found, especially because we work very closely with customers, is that, understand the customer's needs. Ultimately, to differentiate myself in my role and how I engage with my customers, right? Number one is truly about understanding their problems. Right. And not just listening to them talk, right, but truly understanding the why behind everything they say, right? Because that personal interest in their problem, the show of empathy for whatever issues they're facing also leaves a lasting experience. The other thing from a personal perspective, right, is that I personally have a very high expectation of myself. In a sort of cliched way, I feel like I am my biggest competition, right? So rather than striving to differentiate myself from peers and so on and so forth, one thing I always look for is where are the issues that are available right now or that are there right now? And the way I interpret that to myself is that, look, if the issues are there, it's because someone hasn't solved it. So inherently, I will differentiate myself by identifying those problems, going after them, innovating, and solving them. So that's one part of my job. The other thing, frankly speaking, as a leader, You also have, a need to also understand what you're doing right, and because that's another trap that a lot of folks fall into, right? You forget what's working, focus on what's not working, and then you break what's currently working, right? Maybe by not giving it enough attention, or maybe by not evolving with the times, right? So that sustenance, in fact, is super important, right? And of course, issues come on and you have to address them. I think everyone does that. So those are a little, just a couple of nuggets I'd address or point to as areas that I differentiate myself.
Thank you both. Stephanie, I also love the idea of turning something that might seem like a real challenge into something that works for you. And then Tosin, looking at the problems, right? Because really that's why we're there. Wisdom, question for you. I think Tosin just mentioned like conflicts or situations will arise. So how do you respond to either unconstructive feedback or feedback that you disagree with in a constructive manner?
Yeah, this is a really tough one, because I think we all have been in circumstances where we just don't really want to be there. One thing I personally have found pretty helpful is just practicing self-awareness, like understanding where you are emotionally, how you're feeling, like does your feet hurt? Are you uncomfortable in your chair? So paying attention to yourself, I think, is actually really important. And it might seem kind of mundane, but I actually think it goes a long way in helping you deal with those circumstances in a more healthy way. So I'll consider an example here. So let's say you've got a meeting with your boss, right? And you usually, because of something that happened in the past, have this kind of negative feeling when you're talking to him or her, because you're like, oh, you said this thing and I don't like it. What happens then is when they give you some feedback, chances are, because of how you feel about them, you're going to just color it in the most negative light. And that is extremely detrimental. I think regardless of how you feel about someone or what they've done or what they've said, it's important that when you're receiving feedback that you might disagree with, that you actually try and minimize the assumptions you're making, right? I actually studied NLP, natural language processing, in grad school, and one thing I can tell you is English is an extremely ambiguous language. And so there's usually sometimes a huge dichotomy between the intention of some spoken word and the interpretation on the other hand. And so I think when you're in those circumstances, it's really helpful to try not to jump to conclusions. And, in the end, just have a conversation, right? Not a debate, have a conversation, ask clarifying questions like, could you provide more detail on X? What actions would you suggest I take to improve in Y? All of these sorts of things, I think, help you deal with those situations in a more productive manner. I think it's also extremely important to have a growth mindset. Stephanie touched on this earlier, but I think if you go into those kinds of situations with an intention to try and improve yourself, you're much less likely to be in a situation where, because of the kind of feedback you're getting, the conversation just devolves into something that's entirely toxic. And so if you're going in with okay, I know I might get some tough love, but I'm going to just go roll with the punches and try and figure out the gem of something I can use here to improve myself, I think you'll probably come off better in the end. And, in the end, just say thank you. It's really, really hard for managers, I say anyone, to give anyone tough feedback, right? I think if anyone takes the time to try and think about you, your performance, how you're doing, what you could improve, what your strengths are, whether or not you agree, the fact that they've taken that time and put that effort into trying to help you improve, whether or not you agree, is something that's applaudable. And I think that kind of mindset of being positive and being appreciative, showing gratitude, I think can help anyone deal with this sorts of really tough conversations.
Thank you. Yes. So kind of in that same path. So I think we've definitely all made mistakes, sometimes in the workplace or with our jobs, or even experience conflict in the workplace. So when those things happen, when you make a professional mistake or experience conflict with someone, how do you bounce back from that? Stephanie?
So as a salesperson, I'll tell you, I've made plenty of mistakes in selling, and mistakes from being outsold to I didn't follow the process or I didn't follow through on something, and I've even lost deals because of it. And as a leader, I've made mistakes around maybe I didn't judge a company's internal politics properly, or I missed a coaching or teachable moment. So we've all made the mistakes, and what I've learned is the lesson is kind of in the mistake and how you come back from it. So there's a couple of things that like I would coach people towards that I do when it comes to making a professional mistake. And Wisdom, you kind of hit some of these points already, but I'll kind of go through it. Number one is I have learned you have to 100% let your emotions cool down. If you think about it, adrenaline is the absolute worst drug when it comes to getting over a mistake. And you kind of think there's a reason why football players watch game day tape on Monday, not Sunday after the game. Like, you really need to let the emotions go so that you can be clear-headed. Once you're clear-headed, then that's when you really can do a good post-mortem of what happened, and kind of you've got to recognize your part in the situation that you're in versus just kind of looking at other people's parts. You really got to take responsibility for how did you get there? How did you personally get there? And then you put a plan in place on what are you going to do differently to ensure that you're not back in that place again. Making a mistake isn't the problem. Making the same mistake multiple times, that becomes a problem. So you really want to put a plan in place on what you're going to do differently. The other thing that I found to be just really important is once you've made a mistake and the emotions are gone, you've kind of thought about it, you really need to own up to whatever that mistake was almost immediately. That is whether it is a mistake with another team member, above you with your boss that's impacted him or her in any way, or with your direct reports. When you own up to it immediately, it's amazing how much respect you get from other people from doing that. And then because you've already kind of done a postmortem, you can also talk about what you're going to do differently, and people respect you for that. And then finally, I would say it's like really important to kind of, forgive yourself and forgive others. Mistakes are going to be made. And, one of the things that I learned when the first time I was promoted from being an individual contributor to a leader, my issue really was I was a bit of a perfectionist, and I was really afraid of making a professional mistake. You almost get in your head where you have almost analysis paralysis. So one of my mentors at the time, he said to me, Steph, stop trying to be perfect and, beating yourself up for making a mistake and being afraid to take a risk because you don't want to make a mistake. He said, at this point, your goal is to be right 80% of the time. And the other 20%, when you're not right, that's when you pivot and you correct. And his point to me was that 20%, that's where the growth and the learning comes from. So don't be afraid to do that. It's really how you address it. So those are kind of the strategies and the mindset that I have when it comes to bouncing back from professional mistakes.
Thank you. Wisdom, do you also want to respond to that?
I think Stephanie's done a great job. There's very little to add. I do think one part of making a mistake that many people find challenging is just that first step, which is just owning it, right? I think as soon as you can, you should just own up to it and admit it. I was in a situation a couple of months ago on my birthday. I was on the phone ordering cake. They were asking, hey, vanilla, chocolate, and I was like selecting. And suddenly I got like text messages and Slack messages and all of that. I was like, what's going on? And a coworker of mine was the one pinging me. Apparently, I was in a Zoom call and they could all hear me ordering cake. These were hundreds of people on the call. It was really embarrassing, as you might imagine. So I had no idea how it happened. So as soon as I figured that out, I searched my browser tabs, tried to close everything, got out of the meeting. And then the first thing I did was I went and talked to the person who was organizing the meeting, because I think they had to like restart it because they thought it was someone intruding on your meeting, and just really own up to it. Like, I apologize. It's like, I'm really sorry. I can't go out to party with my friends. It's my birthday and I'm trying to order a cake. So I think that's extremely important. Start off by just owning it, admitting it. And the next thing I did was I talked to my friends, my family. I mourned. I was like, oh my goodness, look at what I did. This is so embarrassing. So I think it's important to actually just mourn it, like let it out of your system. The next thing I did, and I think Stephanie touched on this, was I tried to learn, right? Like, what could I do different? For one, I'm going to always mute and turn my video off as my default setting. So that never, ever happens. I think once you take that time to critically think about, what you could have done differently, you can then be in the perfect position to move on. And that's extremely important. You have to learn to forgive yourself and move on, knowing that you've done everything you should do in response to that mistake.
Thank you. Tosin, question for you. Then this is something that I personally struggle with all the time. And also, my colleagues, we've talked about this a lot. How do you communicate your value or the value of the work that you do without it seeming like you're boasting or you're bragging?
All right, there we go. So that certainly is a struggle, especially in an environment where a lot of people believe, that, you have to speak up for yourself and you have to kind of, toot your own horn and so on and so forth. And, I think every time I think about doing that, and I'll be completely honest with you, still something that I probably still struggle with to some degree, right? But ultimately, what it comes down to for me is communicate. If your communication is oriented towards, self, then you certainly boast it, right? Now, does it mean you don't talk about the great things you've done, right? Does it mean you don't address, what you know with your colleagues and, help them address issues and so on and so forth, right? No, it doesn't mean that, right? So then the question becomes, how do I communicate in a way that doesn't have high self-orientation, right? So the first thing I think about is tying it back to results, right? Results and value for, the organization or the company and so on. So that's number one, right? And then it's also about how you communicate. And one thing that I've heard, a lot of people talk about, in fact, MongoDB CEO David Echeria talked about this in one of our sales kickoffs, which is really around the trust equation. And so people who've heard about the trust equation, you probably know what that means, right? And the whole idea of trust, it's really around credibility, right? Am I credentialed to talk about this, whether formally or informally, right? Do I really know my stuff, right? In a way that conveys knowledge and not, not boastfulness, right? Am I reliable, demonstrating the right actions around what I'm doing and so on. And then the last part is really reliability. Do I demonstrate, essentially, do I do what I say and say what I do, right? And underlying all of that, right, as a denominator is self-orientation. And if you in math, right, if the denominator goes up, the result goes down, right? So essentially what happens, I lose trust. And as long as I take all those four factors, right, and I apply them in the right capacity, right, I'm actually able to communicate what I've done without seeming boastful, And, the other thing also that I always encourage folks, I think Stephanie mentioned this, is really to talk to mentors, right? Anytime I have any question, right, one thing I first go to is like, who can I talk to about this? Because a lot of people have walked this path. And if the purpose is growth and recognition and, and so on, right, how do I do this in the most impactful way possible? And I found that mentors have been super helpful in giving some guidance around that as well.
Thank you. Wisdom, what advice do you have for people who think they're ready for promotion, but their manager may not think that they're ready? How should they approach that?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to having a conversation, right? A really important thing, I think, regardless of what circumstance you find yourself in, is just working to converse with people, right? I think right now, the society is pretty charged and people aren't always doing their best to try and appreciate some other person's perspective, especially in cases where they don't agree. And so I think it's extremely important, certainly in a professional setting, that you try and do that. So just work with your manager, ask them, why don't they think you're ready for a promotion? And actually listen to whatever gaps they communicate, right? And ask follow-up clarifying questions, ask what you can do. And once they give you all that information, take that feedback really seriously. Now, again, you don't have to agree with it, but kind of getting into a debate match, I don't find to be particularly constructive, right? If there's a reason you feel you are ready, but your manager thinks you're not, there's a disconnect there. And so it's your job to try and bridge that gap to connect that disconnect. So if it's something that they think you're missing, if you are missing it, then take the feedback and plug that hole. And if it's something you think you're not missing, then cordially explain to them why you think you're not missing this and get to a common understanding as to where that disconnect is coming from. I think if you kind of have this, again, growth mindset where you're working towards trying to improve, trying to grow, you probably come out of this situations much better than you would otherwise. And I know, it's normal. Everyone wants to be like the boss. Promotions are great. But I do think it's extremely, extremely important to focus on yourself, right? Focus on your skills, your knowledge, and the manner in which you execute your job. Because ultimately, if you're a rock star, you really don't have to ask for a promotion. A promotion will come to you. So that's what I'd recommend.
Okay, so we're down to our last two panel questions because we do want to leave time for Q&A. So Chosin, this one is for you. As you've accelerated your career, is there a mantra or ritual that you've used to kind of keep you going?
I think there are a couple of things that are really important. First thing is I'd say take opportunities with both hands, right? Opportunities will often come at times that we don't expect them. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. So when I look at opportunities, I look at different types of opportunities. I look at micro opportunities, and then I look at mega opportunities, right? And, micro opportunities, in essence, become bigger ones. But what micro opportunities are, they come way more frequently, right? So it could be an opportunity to work with a colleague, an opportunity to simply answer a question, right? To offer assistance to someone, to present at a conference or some type of gathering, to create educational material for peers and community customers and so on. So I think what a lot of people think about when they think about growth is the mega growth, right? I got this huge promotion that, meant this thing for my career, and it means I updated my LinkedIn and all my network got the ping that this person is now this role. But the truth of the matter is that growth actually happens in much smaller steps, because by actually establishing yourself with your community, your network, your peers, your colleagues, your bosses, your boss's boss, and so on, that's what spells the bigger growth. And so when the bigger growth comes, right, you're actually ready to take it because not only have you done the things to get there, everyone also trusts you to be able to perform in that role, which kind of leads me to the macro or mega opportunities, right? And I will tell you, there hasn't been any growth that I have taken that I have not been nervous. Literally none, right? I get nervous every single time something comes. I got nervous just to do this panel today, right? And I think what I mean by that is that nervousness is part of, if I don't feel nervous about it, then it's not really growth for me, right? And that's the one thing I try to embrace. So when the promotion comes, when the opportunity comes, when someone puts you in that position to actually grow, embrace it with both hands. And I'm going to misquote this by Richard Branson, right? I think he said something to the effect that if someone offers you an opportunity, even if you're not ready or you don't know what to do, and the opportunity seems really great, take it and go figure it out, right? And that's really been my mantra. Right? Embrace the pain, embrace the nervousness, embrace the fear, and go take on the world. That's basically it.
Thank you. And so for our last question, Stephanie, what is one thing that attendees can do today to help them on their path to a successful career?
Gosh, you've made this difficult by saying the one thing. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I spend 5 things into one
just
thing?
one of the 5. You know, it doesn't have to be the only one,
right.
But like what's a good thing?
Right. I'm just joking. I think for the attendees, part of that thing that they can be doing today, they're doing it right now. And that is going out of your way to network and seek understanding from people who might be leaders in the field that you're interested in participating in. Surrounding yourself by people who have done it before. I mentioned in one of my previous answers the whole idea of being kind of an inquisitive learner. Being that inquisitive learner and putting yourself in situations where you're going to surround yourself with people who have already done it. That is a great first step, regardless of what industry you're interested in and moving forward in.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to respond before we move to Q&A?
Yes, I'll just echo what Tosin said. He made a subtle but really, really profound point. I think a lot of us sometimes get carried away by big picture, but it's important to ask yourself, what can I do this quarter, in August, today, to meet my goals? And I think it's important to meet those needs of the day, if you will, making sure that everything you do every single day is aligned with what your long-term goals are. I like to think it's helpful to consider yourself as an athlete where you're consistently seeking ways that you can grow and you can improve yourself. In our jobs, your skills, your experiences, your execution, you are the product, right? For lack of a better term. So you have to do your best to make sure that you're performing consistently such that, when that opportunity comes for that promotion or for that new job, you are the obvious choice for additional responsibility. One thing I'll leave you all with is a quote by, I think it was Cat Williams in one of his comedy shows. He was like, be your star player, and the idea there is take care of yourself, like focus on you, improve yourself. If you're not helping yourself, no one's going to help you. So I think it's important to speak positively to yourself, encourage yourself, and, start with being the best you can be. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll just add to that, and I think Wisdom kind of touched on this, but I want to make sure I separate it, which is chart your path, right? Oftentimes people start something without really having any kind of idea or destination in mind or goal. Chart your path. And I really strongly encourage that, create a document, write it down, review it at intervals to see how you are executing or, growing towards that goal, right? And if there's something that you feel you need to do to get better at something, then you can identify that because you're not meeting a very specific goal, right? So you want to make sure you chart that.
Hey, Danielle, I know we're trying to get to questions and answers, but I just got to add to what Tosin is saying because it is so very important to be prescriptive about how you're charting your path. And there are so many tools out there that are available to people right now that maybe weren't available even 5 years ago. So the idea of charting your path and taking the onus on yourself for learning, you can be very prescriptive about, once a quarter, I'm going to learn this technical skill, or I'm going to learn this sales skill. And there's so many resources out there that, to Tosin's point, write it down, chart your path, and execute on it. That's excellent.
Thank you. All right, so it looks like we've had some recruiting questions come in. So question for Wisdom, how can someone prepare for MongoDB's technical interview?
Ooh.
Study, know your stuff, and try not to be afraid. We are very merit-based, and so it doesn't matter whether you went to an Ivy League institution or whether you had a 4.0 GPA. What we care about is your ability to execute in the role for which you're being considered. So if it's, for instance, a software development engineer position, it means being very familiar with your data structures, algorithms, doing practice questions, just getting comfortable actually thinking on your feet. I know there are lots of websites out there that allow you to practice questions under time constraints to get better at it. So just do your homework and you'll be fine.
Tosin, which steps did you take to land your first software job? And how did you get your foot in the door?
Yeah. So, this sort of goes back to what Wisdom is saying, right? When I came out of college, I think I was, trying to find a job like everyone else and so on. And the one thing I did was I realized I was actually terrible at interviewing, right? And if you think about what an interview is, it's really the 1 or 2 or 3 or however many hours, but certainly not a whole lot of hours, right? That a company or a recruiter or a hiring manager has to actually get to assess you and get to know you, right? So as subtle as it is, right? So while you certainly want to know your material, right? And that basically goes without saying, you also want to make sure that you're able to communicate that information in a very effective way to whoever is interviewing you, right? Whether it's a recruiter, whether it's a hiring manager. So do not underestimate the importance of communication, especially when it comes to it.
Thank you all. So we only have a few minutes left, and I just quickly wanted to respond to a question from the audience on what MongoDB is doing specifically for diversity within the company. I'm part of the D&I team. It's a brand new team at MongoDB. We're less than a year old. And so some of the things that we're doing specifically is we have a recruiting focus. So for example, our internship program, specifically for engineering roles, I also saw that there was a question on that. And yes, MongoDB hires interns. We're currently at the last week of our first ever virtual internship program. And if you completed the form that the Blavity team shared in the chat, we will be in touch with internship opportunities as well. If you're interested in that, you can click the link to share that you're going in school, that you're still attending school. And so we'll follow up on that. We have a strong focus on recruiting. And so the internship program is a big focus there in terms of nurturing that engineering talent. Interns turn into new grads, which turn into full-time employees. And also we're currently doing a lot of partnership work. So like today, right? So we're really engaging with communities of color through our partnership. Our panel today is an example of that, and just remaining in touch afterwards. All panelists will be in the networking break, so you'll be able to connect with us one-on-one. We'll have your emails, we'll follow up. And so that's just another way in which we're, accessing talent of color and also making sure that our name is out there and we're engaging with the communities that we care about the most. In terms of internal inclusion, we have ERGs, and all panelists here today are members of CUPOC, which is our ERG for people of color. It stands for the Underrepresented or United People of Color at MongoDB. We are a strong group. We meet monthly. We also provide mentorship opportunities to our incoming interns who become members of the group as well. And that's just how we build community internally. And then we also are currently exploring a lot of continued mentorship and talent development programs. We're actively working on this now at MongoDB to ensure that the talent that is at MongoDB can also be nurtured and developed so that we can all reach these leadership positions as well. And with that, we're running out of time. So I just wanted to thank all of the panelists and all of you who have joined today. I hope that you gained new insights. It was really great seeing your notes and questions come through. Blavity team, thank you so much for having us. As a reminder, MongoDB is hiring across departments, across the globe, including the internship program that will open up later during the year. If you submitted the form, we will be in touch. We will send you that swag. You'll also get direct links to our career page and other opportunities like speaking at our annual conference, free access to our tools, including educational tools, and you'll get a one-pager to help build your own roadmap with some of the exercises that the panelists shared today. As I mentioned, all of the panelists, as well as MongoDB recruiters, will stick around for the networking break, so we'll be able to answer some of the other recruiting questions that came through in the chat, and we look forward to connecting with you face-to-face. Thank you all. Have a great one and enjoy the rest of the virtual summit.